On February 24, 2022, Russian forces launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine, shattering European peace. Explosions rocked major Ukrainian cities including Kyiv. Families huddled in fear, seeking shelter from the bombs. The invasion was the culmination of years of simmering tensions and calculated aggression by Russia under Vladimir Putin. Governments imposed crippling sanctions on Russia, targeting its economy and key individuals. Military aid poured into Ukraine from Western countries determined to support Ukraine's defense. The Russian invasion of Ukraine is a pivotal moment in the 21st century. The conflict has exposed the brutality of war and the devastating impact it has on innocent lives. Beyond the immediate consequences, the invasion has far-reaching implications for the future of Europe and the world. The conflict has shattered the illusion of a Europe whole, free, and at peace. The world must stand in solidarity with Ukraine and support the Ukrainian people in their fight for freedom and democracy. To understand the roots of the conflict, we must delve into the complex history of Ukraine and Russia. These two nations share deep cultural and historical ties, tracing their ancestry back to the East Slavic civilization. Despite these shared roots, Ukraine has forged its own distinct identity, shaped by various powers and a unique national consciousness. The desire for an independent Ukrainian state emerged in the 19th century, fueled by a burgeoning sense of national identity and a rejection of Russian imperial rule. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991 presented Ukraine with a historic opportunity to reclaim its independence. Ukraine declared its independence in August 1991, supported by a referendum. In 2004, the presidential election pitted pro-Russian Viktor Yanukovych against pro-Western Viktor Yushchenko. The Orange Revolution, sparked by allegations of electoral fraud, demonstrated the Ukrainian people's commitment to democracy. The protests forced a rerun of the election, which Yushchenko won. The Orange Revolution marked a turning point in Russia-Ukraine relations. In 2014, following the Euromaidan Revolution, Russia seized the Crimean Peninsula. A hastily organized referendum, widely condemned as illegitimate, paved the way for Russia's annexation of Crimea. The conflict in eastern Ukraine escalated dramatically in 2022, when Russia launched a full-scale invasion. This marked a dangerous new chapter in the conflict with far-reaching implications for Ukraine, Europe, and the world. The initial days of the invasion were met with shock and disbelief across the globe. The Russian military aimed for a swift and decisive victory, targeting key military installations and infrastructure. Kyiv became a primary target, with Russian forces advancing from multiple directions. The Ukrainian people, however, responded with extraordinary courage and resilience. Ordinary citizens took up arms, joining territorial defense units and engaging in fierce street battles. President Volodymyr Zelensky remained defiant, becoming a symbol of Ukrainian resistance. As the initial shock waves of the invasion subsided, a narrative of Ukrainian resistance began to emerge. Stories of ordinary citizens taking up arms and standing up to Russian tanks spread on social media. The defiance displayed by Ukrainian soldiers on Snake Island became a rallying cry. The Ukrainian military employed a nimble and effective defense strategy, inflicting heavy losses on Russian forces. The conflict evolved into a war of attrition, with Ukrainian forces bogging down the Russian advance. Citizens organized volunteer groups providing logistical support and assisting in the evacuation of civilians. The initial Russian strategy of a quick victory proved untenable. The battle for Kiev turned into a protracted stalemate, with Ukrainian forces repelling Russian attempts to encircle the capital. Frustrated by their lack of progress, Russian forces shifted focus to southern and eastern Ukraine. The siege of Mariupol became emblematic of the conflict's brutality. Despite the shift in focus, the battle lines remained fluid, with Ukrainian forces launching counteroffensives. The conflict entered a new phase characterized by a more dynamic battlefield and a growing human cost. War does not discriminate. It is the innocent civilians who often bear the brunt of the suffering. The conflict in Ukraine has created a humanitarian crisis, leaving an indelible mark on millions of lives. Homes have been reduced to rubble, families torn apart, and lives extinguished. Hospitals, schools, and residential neighborhoods have been targeted, resulting in widespread destruction and civilian casualties. The United Nations estimates thousands of civilians have been killed, with the true number likely much higher. The psychological trauma inflicted on a generation will take years to heal. The Russian invasion of Ukraine triggered one of the largest refugee crises since World War II. Millions of Ukrainians have been uprooted from their homes, seeking safety and refuge. Neighboring countries, particularly Poland, Romania, and Moldova, have opened their borders and hearts to the influx of refugees. The international community has rallied in support, providing humanitarian aid and financial assistance. The long-term impact of this displacement remains to be seen. The psychological toll of war is often less visible but no less devastating. The conflict in Ukraine has inflicted deep psychological wounds on its people. Despite the immense trauma, the Ukrainian people have displayed remarkable resilience. They have come together, supporting each other and finding strength in their shared identity. The path to healing will be long, but the Ukrainian people's resilience offers hope that the human spirit can endure. Section 1. Global outrage and condemnation. The Russian invasion of Ukraine sent shockwaves through the international community, evoking widespread condemnation and outrage from governments, organizations, and individuals worldwide. The unprovoked attack on a sovereign nation, a blatant violation of international law and the principles enshrined in the United Nations Charter, was met with swift and resolute condemnation. From the halls of the United Nations to the streets of cities across the globe, a chorus of voices rose in unison to denounce the aggression and demand an immediate cessation of hostilities. Governments issued strongly worded statements, condemning the invasion as a violation of Ukraine's territorial integrity and sovereignty. International organizations, including the European Union, NATO, and the G7, joined in the condemnation, calling for Russia to be held accountable for its actions. The invasion sparked a wave of protests around the world, with millions taking to the streets to express their solidarity with Ukraine and demand an end to the bloodshed. From Tokyo to London, from Sydney to New York, people from all walks of life marched in unity, carrying Ukrainian flags, holding anti-war signs, and chanting slogans condemning the aggression. The outpouring of support for Ukraine transcended geographical boundaries and political ideologies, uniting people across the globe in a shared sense of outrage and a common desire for peace. The international community's response to the invasion was not limited to words of condemnation. Governments around the world took concrete actions to hold Russia accountable for its aggression, imposing crippling sanctions on the Russian economy, targeting key individuals within Putin's inner circle, and providing military and humanitarian aid to Ukraine. Section 2. The weight of sanctions, economic and political fallout. In an effort to exert pressure on Russia to cease its aggression and withdraw its forces from Ukraine, the international community unleashed an unprecedented wave of economic sanctions, targeting key sectors of the Russian economy and individuals deemed complicit in the invasion. These sanctions, designed to cripple the Russian economy and limit its ability to wage war, have had a profound impact on Russia's financial system, businesses, and citizens. One of the most significant measures taken was the exclusion of several major Russian banks from SWIFT, the global financial messaging system that facilitates cross-border transactions. This move, crippling Russia's ability to conduct international trade and access global financial markets, sent shockwaves through the Russian economy, leading to a sharp decline in the value of the ruble and triggering a financial crisis. In addition to financial sanctions, Western countries imposed export controls, restricting Russia's access to critical technologies and goods, including semiconductors, software, and oil and gas exploration equipment. These measures aimed at undermining Russia's industrial capacity and its ability to sustain its military operations have further isolated Russia from the global economy. The sanctions have also targeted wealthy Russian oligarchs, close associates of Putin, freezing their assets, and imposing travel bans. These measures, aimed at pressuring Putin's inner circle and eroding support for the war within Russia's elite, have sent a clear message that those who enable and profit from the Kremlin's aggression will be held accountable. The Russian invasion of Ukraine has triggered a seismic shift in global alliances, igniting a new era of great power competition. The conflict has exposed fault lines in the international system, forcing countries to reevaluate their strategic priorities. Europe is profoundly impacted, shattering the illusion of a continent at peace. NATO has been galvanized, prompting a significant military buildup. European countries show newfound resolve in supporting Ukraine. The war has accelerated a global realignment, pushing Russia closer to China. China provides diplomatic and economic support to Russia. The Russia-China partnership challenges the West. The conflict highlights the Indo-Pacific's growing importance. The war demonstrates the interconnectedness of global security. Geopolitical tremors will reshape alliances and test the international order. The conflict ushers in an era of uncertainty and volatility. Navigating the fog of war scenarios for the future. Predicting the trajectory of any conflict is a perilous endeavor, and the war in Ukraine, shrouded in the fog of war and driven by a complex interplay of factors, is no exception. As the conflict enters a protracted phase, with no clear end in sight, several potential scenarios emerge, each with its own set of implications for Ukraine, Russia, and the wider world. One possibility is a negotiated settlement, however elusive it may seem at present. This scenario would likely involve a combination of concessions from both sides, including a Ukrainian commitment to neutrality, a Russian withdrawal of forces, and international security guarantees for Ukraine. However, reaching such an agreement would require significant compromise, a willingness to bridge deep-seated mistrust, and external pressure on both parties to come to the negotiating table. Another scenario is a protracted stalemate, with neither side able to achieve a decisive military victory. This scenario could see the conflict grind on for months, if not years, with intermittent ceasefires and flare-ups of violence. The human cost of such a protracted conflict would be immense, with continued displacement, economic devastation, and a deepening humanitarian crisis. A third, more ominous scenario is a further escalation of the conflict, potentially drawing NATO into a direct confrontation with Russia. This scenario could be triggered by a deliberate or accidental escalation, such as a Russian attack on a NATO member state or the use of chemical or nuclear weapons. The consequences of such an escalation would be catastrophic, potentially leading to a wider European war with global implications. The long road ahead: reconstruction and reconciliation. Regardless of how and when the conflict ends, the road to recovery for Ukraine will be long and arduous. The physical scars of war, the shattered cities, the ravaged infrastructure, the countless lives lost will take years, if not generations, to heal. But the invisible wounds, the psychological trauma inflicted on a nation, will require even greater effort to address. Rebuilding Ukraine will necessitate a monumental effort, both domestically and internationally. The country will need massive financial assistance to rebuild its infrastructure, revive its economy, and provide for the needs of its people. The international community, having stood in solidarity with Ukraine during its darkest hour, will need to demonstrate the same commitment to supporting its recovery. Beyond the physical reconstruction, Ukraine will face the daunting task of healing the deep divisions within its society. The war has exacerbated existing tensions, pitting regions against each other, and creating a legacy of trauma and mistrust. Addressing these divisions, fostering reconciliation, and rebuilding a sense of national unity will be crucial for Ukraine's long-term stability and prosperity. The process of reconciliation will require a commitment to justice and accountability. War crimes committed during the conflict must be thoroughly investigated, and those responsible held accountable. This process, while challenging and potentially divisive, will be essential for establishing the rule of law, restoring trust in institutions, and preventing cycles of violence. Echoes of war, global implications, and a new world order. The war in Ukraine is reshaping global alliances and power dynamics, exposing the fragility of the international system. NATO has been revitalized with increased defense spending and troop deployments. Finland and Sweden's NATO applications underscore Europe's changing security landscape. The conflict accelerates the shift towards a multipolar world, with China and Russia challenging the US-led order. The Indo-Pacific region's importance grows, with the US strengthening alliances to counter China. The war highlights global security interconnectedness, demanding coordinated international responses. Navigating this new world order requires wisdom, diplomacy, and multilateral cooperation. The unfolding future. The Russian invasion of Ukraine marks a stark turning point in history, a stark reminder that the narratives of peace and stability can be shattered by the harsh realities of conflict. The echoes of this war will continue to reverberate across the globe, shaping the geopolitical landscape for generations to come.